Since my children grew up and left home and my husband passed away suddenly one Sunday morning, silence has become my only companion. The house where I once heard the laughter of children, the sound of pots boiling on the stove and the hurried steps of a mother trying to manage everything, has become a sanctuary of memories and absence. My name was Marta. At least that was the name they used when they called me for something. But after a while, no one called anymore, no one knocked on the door anymore, and the phone only rang when it was a wrong number. The routine was reduced to the ticking of the clock on the wall and my own breathing, which I listened to as one listens to the wind, hoping that something would change. I was a housewife and for many years I thought that was all I needed to be. And perhaps it was, because I never cared about luxury or fame, nor did I desire more than to see my family well. But when the house empties and the rooms become just repositories of memories, what's left? There was me and my pots and pans, me and the picture frames, me and the sleeping pills. The longing was so intense it hurt my body. I felt as if grief had taken up residence in my chest. And every time I remembered my husband's face, the way he looked at me at breakfast, the silly jokes on the sofa, my heart seemed to tighten to a point that no prayer could reach. I prayed every day, not with pretty words, nor with perfect faith, but with that raw sincerity of someone who is at rock bottom. Lord, hear me. I just wanted to understand why they left me here alone, why I didn't go with them. And I know that many people may think that this is something a depressed old woman would say, but the truth is that nobody understands the void left when you lose the love of your life, when routine becomes emptiness, when the silence of the house screams louder than any music. I started feeling chest pains, dizziness, a tiredness that wasn't physical. I went to the doctor. They said it was anxiety, exhaustion, maybe accumulated sadness. They prescribed some medication, which I took, but deep down I knew my heart wasn't sick. It was just broken. One day, a random Tuesday, I looked at myself in the kitchen mirror, that old mirror next to the spice cupboard, and I didn't recognize the woman I saw. My eyes were dull, my face expressionless. And for the first time in my life, I said aloud, I'm not alive anymore. I'm just here waiting for my time. That phrase echoed inside me like a plea. And a short time later it was heard. That night, after washing the few dinner dishes and turning off the lights, I felt something strange, a pressure in my chest, a dizziness stronger than all the others. My legs weakened and before I could reach the phone, everything went dark. But what happened next? What I saw, what I experienced, what I felt cannot be described with human words. And that's what I want to tell you now. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the sound. The glass fell from my hand. The glass shattered on the kitchen floor, and the noise echoed as if it came from very far away. I felt my body lose strength, my breath fail, and a strange heat rise from my chest to my head. Then, silence. A silence so profound it seemed to come from within time. For a moment, I thought I had fainted. I tried to open my eyes. But something was different. There was no darkness. There was a soft light, as if I were underwater and the sun was shining from above. The light didn't hurt. On the contrary, it comforted. It was warm, enveloping, almost alive. I tried to breathe and realized I didn't need to. The air simply existed within me. There was no weight, no pain, no fear, just a feeling of absolute lightness. It was then that I looked around and realized I was no longer lying on the kitchen floor. I was above. Yes, above. I looked down and saw my body. It was there, fallen, motionless. My face was pale, my hand still outstretched, as if trying to reach for something. My first thought was confusion. How could I be seeing myself? I tried to touch my face and realized that my hands were passing over me as if I were made of light and wind. The kitchen was the same, but everything seemed clearer, more alive. The colors had a brightness and even the sound of the wall clock sounded different, as if each tick-tock had a spiritual echo. It was then that I saw the kitchen door open. The neighbor, Doña Nusa, came in shouting my name. She lived in the house across the street and always stopped by to see if I was okay. When she saw me fallen, she let out a scream and ran to the phone. I tried to call her. "Nusa, I'm here. I'm okay." But she couldn't hear me. No sound came out of my mouth. That's when despair began to mix with a strange peace. Because at the same time that I saw her panic, I felt something inside me saying, "Don't be scared, everything is all right." I saw the moment the paramedics arrived. They spoke quickly, put on equipment, tried to resuscitate me. I saw everything and at the same time, I felt nothing, no pain, no weight. I just observed with a serenity I had never felt before. It was at that instant that something changed in the light. A presence formed beside me like a luminous shadow, if such a thing exists. It had no defined face, but it conveyed an indescribable tenderness. And when that presence spoke, not with words, but directly to my heart, I understood. "Is everything all right, Mata? You can rest." He knew my name. His voice was sweet, loving, unhurried. It was like hearing love itself speaking to me. And when that presence touched my shoulder, even though I didn't have a physical body, I felt something that no word can translate, the total absence of fear. That presence enveloped me and I realized we were moving away from the scene. The house, the paramedics, the noise, everything was becoming distant, small, like a dream that dissolves at dawn. I didn't fight, I just kept going. Something in me knew I was going home, the real home. But before I completely crossed that light, I saw a scene that made me stop. I saw my eldest daughter arriving, desperate, getting into the ambulance, crying my name. I saw her suffering, the pain, the guilt. And at that moment something inside me split. One part wanted to follow that luminous presence, to rest, to leave. And the other wanted to hug my daughter, tell her I was okay, that she didn't need to cry. And so, between earthly love and celestial love, time seemed to stand still. There was no more clock, no body, no pain, only a silent certainty that life had not ended, it had only changed form. The body on the ground wasn't me. Marta, who always believed she was just a housewife, was for the first time realizing that she was much more than that. That something inside her had always been eternal and was now beginning to awaken. The light before me pulsed, it was as if it were calling me. And when I took the first step towards it, I felt something indescribable, a love that didn't come from outside, but from within, as if the universe itself embraced me. I didn't know it, but that would be the beginning of the experience that would change everything I believed about life, death, and what exists beyond the last breath. I don't know how long I stood observing everything from above. There, time didn't seem to exist, the seconds didn't run and the minutes weren't in a hurry. It was as if each event happened and stopped at the same time. Floating wasn't like flying, it was more like being guided. I wasn't making any effort. It was as if the air carried me with sweetness and, curiously, there was no fear. The fear that had always accompanied me in life of dying, of growing old alone, of suffering simply did not exist there. I felt free. I looked down again. I saw my body on a stretcher inside the ambulance. I saw the professionals trying everything to bring me back. One of them pressed my chest tightly, another adjusted the equipment, and I saw every detail as if my eyes had multiplied. I could see from several angles at the same time and even perceive what they were feeling. The young man who was resuscitating me was distressed, but at the same time concentrated. He was young. His name was Lucas. I knew this without anyone telling me. I felt his compassion, his sincere intention to save me. And it was as if a golden light enveloped him, the light of human kindness, the purest of all. When I realized this, I felt a wave of profound gratitude. It was as if my spiritual heart expanded. I wanted to tell him, "It's okay, you did your best." But the words wouldn't come out, just a silent thought that seemed to transform into energy. And suddenly something surprising happened. He paused for a moment, looked at my still face, and said almost in a whisper, "I don't know why, but I feel that she is at peace." At that moment, tears streamed down my spiritual face. Yes, I was crying, but those tears were not of pain, they were of love, of recognition. It was as if the universe had shown me in seconds the beauty of human empathy. The ambulance moved away, but I remained suspended there, and then I felt a gentle force pulling me upwards, as if the air had become magnetic. I looked up and realized that the ambulance's roof was no longer a limit. Everything around began to dissolve. The sound of the engine disappeared. The cold of the ground vanished. The light, that living light, took over everything. I floated inside it, and as I rose, I began to hear something. It was music, but not like the music of the earth. It was a melody made of colors, of vibrations, of feelings. It was as if each tone carried an emotion. Peace, love, tenderness, hope. No instrument, no human could produce that. I felt like crying again, but now with joy, because I realized I wasn't alone. In that soft light, I perceived shapes approaching, silhouettes made of light, some larger, some smaller. They moved harmoniously, as if floating in sync. One of them stood out, coming towards me, radiating something familiar. I couldn't see a face clearly, but there was a loving, warm, maternal presence. When she approached, I heard a voice inside my heart saying, "Marta, calm down. You are safe. It is being received with love." At that moment, I felt a shiver run through my entire being. I knew that voice wasn't new. It had been with me since childhood. It was the same voice that, in moments of pain, seemed to whisper prayers that I barely knew by heart. I remembered my mother. I remembered when she used to say, "God always sends someone when we need them most." And I realized that was exactly what was happening. The luminous presence extended its hands, and I felt them even without having physical hands. It was a touch of energy, a fusion of souls. Everything inside me quieted down. No doubt, no questions, just a feeling, a profound sense of finally being home. I looked down one last time. The earthly world now seemed distant, like an old memory. I saw the streets, the buildings, the hurried people, unaware of the miracle of life that pulsates in every breath. And a thought echoed within me. If they knew how much they are loved, they wouldn't live in so much fear. The presence beside me enveloped me in a cloak of light. I knew I was about to cross something, an invisible boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds. And when the clarity before me began to open, I realized that the love I felt didn't come from that light. It was the light itself. I took a step, if I can call it that, and was enveloped by a feeling of home, as if I were returning to the place I always came from, but had forgotten. It was the beginning of something much greater. I wasn't just floating, I was returning to my true home. The sensation of crossing that light was like plunging into the womb of creation. There were no doors, no portals, no visible limits. It was as if I were being absorbed by a love so immense, so profound, that my cells, or whatever I was in that state, vibrated in ecstasy. The presence beside me, the one that called me by name, that enveloped me with peace, remained with me. It didn't speak with words, it was as if it communicated directly with what was most intimate within me. Every feeling, every thought of mine was understood even before it formed. When I crossed that threshold, a new landscape was revealed. And I need to say this with all humility. There is nothing in this world that compares to what I saw. It was a field of living light, but it wasn't just brightness. It was as if the very air had color and sound. Everything there seemed to sing. The trees, yes, there were trees, seemed to have consciousness. They were not only there, they received me as if they recognized me. The leaves shone like crystals, but had a softness reminiscent of silk. A warm wind danced among them, carrying a fragrance that recalled the smell of childhood, of being held, of home. And, in the distance, golden hills seemed to pulsate, as if the ground had life. The sky, the sky was not blue, nor gray, nor full of clouds. It was a mantle of colors that changed gently, as if each emotion of mine influenced the landscape. And at the center of it all, a greater light, more intense than the sun, but without hurting the eyes, shone with a presence that called to me without demanding. I walked, although I didn't use my feet. It was as if my whole being moved with the will to be there. And with each step, a forgotten memory returned, as if walking through that place I was remembering who I really was. I saw luminous shapes passing by me. Some seemed to be just passing by, others stopped, smiled with their eyes that were not like ours, but conveyed a depth impossible to describe. I didn't know those souls, but somehow they knew me, and I felt love coming from them like a river that never dries up. The presence that guided me led me through a kind of garden. There were no marked paths. It was as if everything opened naturally to our passage. Flowers that seemed made of light greeted us with a slight glow. Some even changed color when I approached, as if responding to my energy. There was no judgment there, no hurry. It was a space where everything had meaning, even without explanation. And for the first time in my entire existence, I felt completely understood. All pain, all mistakes, all guilt, everything was dissolved in that atmosphere of acceptance. It was as if the entire universe said, "You did the best you could. I could, and that's enough." At a certain point, I saw a kind of lake. Its surface was liquid silver, and in it I saw reflections, not of my face, but of moments from my life. It wasn't like a movie. It was more like reliving certain experiences, but with a new perspective. I saw the birth of my first child and perceived the presence of beings of light in that room, helping, smiling, vibrating with me. I saw when I cried alone in the bathroom after my husband's death and realized that I was never truly alone. There was someone embracing me, even if invisible. I even saw my mistakes, the harsh words I said unintentionally, the moments when I judged, the times I shut myself off out of fear. But all of this didn't come with condemnation, it came with understanding, as if heaven were telling me, "Now you see, and that's enough to grow." The lake showed me that each of my choices had an impact, but that, above all, the love I gave, even in small gestures, was what truly remained. I walked away from the lake with a light heart, and at that moment, the presence that accompanied me pointed to the horizon, where a new light was emerging, even more intense. "It's time to go a little deeper," she said. Not with sound, but with a vibration that touched my essence. I felt that something important was about to happen, something that would explain everything, something that would forever change what I believed about life, death, and what exists between them. And it was there, with my heart more open than ever, that I began to walk towards the next encounter. The light before me began to pulse differently. It was soft, but alive, as if it were breathing. Each pulse seemed to call my name. The presence that guided me stopped and, with a gesture of tenderness, let me continue alone. "You need to see for yourself," I felt in my heart. I took a few steps, or perhaps I just thought about walking, and the space responded. And then something began to form in front of me. First a golden mist. Then subtle shapes, human silhouettes made of shine, shimmering as stars in human bodies. My first instinct was astonishment. I knew that those presences were familiar to me. Even without defined faces, my heart recognized them before my eyes. And then a figure stood out from the group. She walked towards me, with slow, serene steps, enveloped in a white, almost silvery light. And when that soul approached, everything inside me broke into tears that were not of sadness, but of gratitude. "My God, Mum?" Yes, it was her. The face was the same one I remembered from my oldest dreams, but without wrinkles, without pain. Her smile had the sweetness of when I was a child and fell asleep in her lap. She didn't say anything, she just hugged me, and I truly felt the warmth of that hug. It wasn't a metaphor, it was real. In that touch, all the emptiness of loneliness, all the nights I cried alone, all the pain accumulated over years simply dissolved. It was as if the love that I lacked, I wish she had waited patiently for me on the other side while she was alive. She ran her hand through my hair, as she did when I was a girl, and said, without sound, only inside me, "You were never alone, my daughter, not for a moment. I cried. I cried like I had never cried before. And while I did, other figures began to approach. I recognized my father with the same serene look I saw in old photos. I recognized my grandmother, the one who taught me my first prayers. Even a dear neighbor, Mr. Antonio, who she always brought fresh bread on Sundays. Everyone was the radiant, enveloped in peace, but among them was a smaller presence, a child. She ran towards me, laughing as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. And when she got close, she stopped, looked into my eyes and smiled in a way that took my breath away. I didn't know her, I had never seen her. And yet, something inside me broke and lit up at the same time. She came closer, took my hand with her small hands alight and said to me, and I heard clearly, "Hi, Mommy." My heart stopped. "What do you mean, Mommy?" I asked, confused. And then everything came to the surface. One day, many years ago, before I had my children, I suffered a miscarriage. It was a silent pain, a loss I kept inside me. I never talked about it, never gave it a name, never cried as I should have. But now the before me was that living, pure, whole soul. She looked at me and said, "I've always been close to you." When you looked at the sky and felt peace without knowing why, I fell to my knees, if I still had knees, and cried with an open heart. My mother's presence sustained me, while that child enveloped me with the sweetest light I've ever felt. It was in that instant that I realized. Nothing is lost. No love, no bond, no true feeling is undone. Time, distance, death. None of that has power over love. All those souls looked at me with a smile that said more than 1,000 words, and a message echoed within me as if it came from all of them at the same time. You are loved. You always have been. And all the love you gave, however small it seemed, was kept here. The surrounding landscape shone brighter. The air seemed to vibrate in harmony. And I, surrounded by those I loved and even by that love I never got to know on earth, understood for the first time that death is not the end. Death is merely a reminder that love is eternal. And in that silent communion, a new light began to emerge from behind them, even more intense, purer, almost impossible to look at. I felt that the time had come to hear something greater, something that surpassed even the reunion. The divine presence was coming to meet me. The light that emerged from behind the souls I had met again was unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was a living light, but not like the previous ones. This one seemed to come from within all things at once, as if it were the source from which everything emanated. My heart, or what I felt as my heart, began to race, not from fear, but from reverence. I knew that something sacred was approaching. The souls that surrounded me took a step back in respect. The child held my hand one last time and smiled before gently stepping away, as if to say, "Now it's just you and him." And then she arrived. I cannot describe this presence with precision. I don't know if it was a man, a woman, young or old. It was all of that and at the same time none of that. It had form, but it was made of pure light. Its eyes, if it had eyes, saw even the most hidden in me. And yet there was no judgment, there was love. Total love, unconditional love. When that presence approached, I felt my whole being bow down, not out of fear, but out of love. It was like meeting the Creator again, the Father, the Mother, the Friend, the love of life, all in one. And then he spoke, not with words, but with a vibration so pure that every cell of my existence was illuminated with the message, "Marta, beloved daughter, you are light. You have always been light, but you forgot." I cried because it was true. I lived a life of dedication, of simple love, but many times I felt small, invisible, forgotten. And now, before him, I realized that at no moment was I forgotten. I simply forgot about myself. He continued. You thought your mission was small, that taking care of the house, feeding the children, comforting neighbors was not enough? But I tell you, each gesture of love built invisible bridges between heaven and earth. I remembered the times I made coffee for my tired husband, The simple cakes I made to brighten the children's birthdays, the times I listened to a friend in silence, offering only my presence. All of that mattered. What sustains the universe is not great deeds, it is love in the details. I felt ashamed of so many times having felt useless, unimportant, and at the same time a gentle warmth enveloped me. He knew everything and yet loved me deeply. I remained silent for a while, a time that could not be measured there. And then, within my spirit, a question arose: why so much suffering? Why the loneliness? Why the pain of loss, of grief, of silence? The answer came like a breath that calmed everything within me. Pain is an invitation, a call to return to me. I never send pain as punishment. But when it arrives, it's so that you discover how much you can grow, love, transform, and so that you finally hear me. My spiritual eyes filled with light. It was as if each of his words cleansed old scars, washed away sadness kept for decades. And then, sweetly, he showed me images. I saw people I didn't even remember, neighbors, colleagues, even strangers, being touched by my small gestures. A smile, a word, a prayer said alone at night. Each act echoed in time, as if forming currents of light that spread throughout the world. Nothing is lost. Everything is transformed into light when it is born from love. At that moment, I understood that the life I led, that simple, domestic, silent routine, was sacred. It was not small, it was eternal. I felt an even stronger presence around me, as if the universe itself were embracing me. And then he said in a deeper tone, "But it's not your time yet. You need to go back." My heart broke. Go back after all this? After finding my mother, my daughter, after finally feeling like I'm home? And he answered even before I asked, "Do you have something to say? Someone needs to hear what you saw. You will be my messenger, because the world has forgotten, but love never dies and death is not the end." I remained silent and then, with my heart ablaze, I simply accepted. Before leaving, he enveloped me in an even more intense light, and within it I heard one last phrase that has echoed within me every day since. "Take this truth back. You have never been alone and you never will be. I am in everything. I am the love that created you." And then the light began to fade and the weight of matter began to return. And the silence of the sky gave way to the sound of hospital equipment. I was returning. The light began to recede like a wave returning to the sea after kissing the sand. And with it I felt a void begin to form within me. Not a void of absence, but of decision. I was between two worlds, still enveloped in the peace of the beyond, still feeling his presence, but beginning to hear in the distance the sounds of the physical world, machines, voices, cries and, above all, the sound of a beating heart. Mine. The choice was before me, to remain in that place where everything was light, love, fullness, where I rediscovered my mother, my daughter, my true essence, where there was no pain, fear, loneliness, or to return, to go back to a silent house, a fragile body, a world where pain still exists and time hurts us. And even so, something inside me knew. I needed to go back. I felt the divine presence still by my side. He didn't force me. He just waited with infinite love and said one last time, "You have the choice, daughter, but remember, there are those who need to hear what you saw." I thought of my daughter alive, of her pain, of her face when she saw me being taken away by the ambulance, of how much she still carried questions, guilt, fears that she never had the courage to express. I thought of the people who live in silence, as I lived, who feel small, forgotten, without purpose. I thought of the grieving mothers, the widows, in their cold beds, the children without ground, of every soul that asks itself, is there something after? And then I understood, going back wouldn't be a punishment. It would be an act of love, a service, a continuation of the mission I always had, even without knowing it. My mother approached one last time, took my hands in hers, made of light. Her eyes said everything. She understood. She supported me. "Go, my daughter, the world needs your truth. We'll meet again later." The child also returned, touched my face and said in the sweetest voice I've ever heard, "Mommy, I will always be with you." Even on the other side of the veil. I felt my spirit tremble. Such immense love enveloped me that I thought I couldn't bear it. It was like being enveloped by all the tenderness of the universe in a single embrace. And then, without words, without gestures, only with the silent decision of the soul, I accepted. I accepted to return. And it was at that moment that everything began to change again. The landscape dissolved like mist under the sun, the colors faded gently, the presences receded, but not with sadness, with confidence. I felt a force pulling me, as if the thread of life were calling me back. The weight began to return. The lightness gave way to density. The infinite peace gave way to labored breathing, to the sound of the heart monitor beeping. And then I woke up. My eyes opened slowly. The light of the hospital I was blinded for a moment. My body was heavy, it ached, my throat was dry. And beside the bed, my daughter, her eyes red from crying so much, held my hand. "Mom, Mom, you're back." I saw her face dissolve into tears, but not tears of sadness, of relief, of astonishment, of 1,000 questions that exploded inside her without needing to be said. The only thing I could say in a hoarse voice was, "I saw heaven." She cried even more, rested her head on my shoulder, and we stayed like that, silent, but now a silence full of meaning. I knew the journey was beginning again, but now with another light inside me, I had a mission. And although I didn't know yet how, or when, or for whom, a certainty sustained me. I didn't come back in vain. Being back in my body was like trying to fit back into clothes that no longer fit me. Everything was tight, limited. Every part of my body seemed to scream as if it were being forcibly rekindled. But more than the physical pain, it was the contrast. The contrast between the dimension of light, freedom, love and this dense, noisy, heavy world. The hospital with its smells, its metallic noises, its white walls, the pain in the chest, the needle in my arm, the oxygen tube, everything seemed too small for the soul that now inhabited this body. And yet, I was there, alive. My daughter wouldn't let go of my hand. Her eyes were swollen, but they shone with a hope I had never seen before. She asked things, if I remembered, if I felt pain, if I knew where I was, but my mind was far away, still echoing the whispers of heaven. I couldn't speak much. Each word required effort, but everything inside me screamed a truth. I needed to tell what I lived through in those first days of hospital, between exams and doctors' smiles, between visits and diagnoses. I remained a different kind of silence, a full silence, no longer empty like the one before. It was a silence where heaven still whispered. I felt the presence of my mother near the bed. I felt my spiritual daughter walking through the corridors. One morning I heard the same voice that spoke to my heart say softly, "Rest. You will know when it's time to speak." And then I just cried. I cried. Every day, not from sadness, but from an overflowing of feelings that I never knew how to name. The nurse said it was the shock, that it was the trauma, but I knew. I cried because it was impossible to come back from heaven and pretend that nothing happened. I remember one morning in particular. The window of the hospital room was ajar and a ray of sunlight entered with such force that it covered my face. I closed my eyes and for a second felt that same warmth of divine light. It was like a reminder. I am with you even here. From that moment on, something began to change in me. I no longer saw healthcare professionals as just workers. I saw their auras, I saw the energy of love or exhaustion around them. I began to feel the hearts of people, even without them speaking. The doctor who treated me coldly, I realized he was carrying an old grief. The nurse, who always smiled, I saw that she was silently praying for each patient. Even the flowers in the vase in the room seemed to be looking at me. I saw everything with new eyes. My daughter noticed. She looked at me as if trying to decipher someone who had gone and returned. "You're different, Mom," she said. And I just smiled. "I died," I replied simply. "But death is only the beginning." She didn't understand immediately. And I didn't try to explain everything at once either. I knew that certain truths need to mature in the heart, but inside me a certainty grew. Nothing would be the same as before. After a few days, I returned home, the same silent house, but now full of signs. On the way from the hospital to the front door, I saw the world with different eyes. I saw elderly people walking slowly and realized the value of each step. I saw mothers with small children and felt the echo of the love that connects us. Even there, birds on the power line seemed to be part of something bigger. The old kitchen clock still ticked. But now that sound wasn't loneliness, it was time. Time that was given to me again. With purpose, a gift. I, among my pots and pans, looked at the picture frames and cried again, but this time not from longing but from gratitude, because now I knew they are still with me, all of them, my husband, my mother, my daughter. Love hasn't gone away, it has only changed form. The house was no longer a tomb. It was a temple, and the silence was not absence, it was space to listen. That night, before sleeping, I closed my eyes and said, "If it is your will, use my life, use my voice. I came back for something, show me the way." And I slept peacefully for the first time in many years, because now I knew I came back with a mission and I wasn't alone. The following days were like being reborn within the same skin. The world around me was the same, the streets, the neighborhood, the smell of coffee in the morning, but I was no longer the same. Before I only existed, now I lived with purpose. As soon as I got home, everything seemed more alive, more meaningful. Every little thing carried a glow that I hadn't seen before. Via the sound of the kettle whistling, the wind passing through the curtains, the simple fact of waking up and feeling my heart beat in